Senti, a proposito invece della tua famiglia, so che hanno fatto molti sacrifici per te, i tuoi genitori.
Sì, devo tanto a mia famiglia, a mio papà, a mia mamma, che si sono sacrificati tanto. Non eravamo una famiglia ricca, diciamo una famiglia normale, però papà che mi seguiva sempre mentre giocavo a calcio, sempre mi comparava scarpe, quelli che costavano di più, voleva sempre che avevo meglio per giocare calcio. E alla fine, quando avevo 14 anni, che dovevo fare il passo importante, andare in un'altra città, in Slovacchia, in capitale, ho dovuto vendere la macchina per andare in Bratislava. Allora, questi erano sacrifici che hanno fatto e sono contento che ne hanno fatto. Questo mi ha dato tanto, mi hanno insegnato a essere così come sono, una persona semplice.
Towards the end of the summer of 1987, in the Slovakian city of Banská Bystrica, Marek Hamšík was born. Before turning 6, he'd lived through some of the most significant events in his country's history. From the Velvet Revolution in '89, which ended decades of communist rule in Czechoslovakia, to the 1993 split, which led to the formation of two new nations, the Czech Republic and Slovakia, the unknowing youngster was to be raised in a fresh democracy. Though famed for its mining industry, Marek valued his feet over his hands and rose to prominence in his hometown after joining the small youth team UP Podlevice and attracting the gaze of Slovan Bratislava. Boasting the most titles ever, their record of developing homegrown talent was renowned, so the 15-year-old made the 200-kilometre journey in pursuit of his dream. His stint in the capital lasted 2 years, and given only 6 games, he'd managed to show enough for Italian northerners Brescia to part ways with €500,000, which despite Hamšík's potential, the club couldn't turn down. Fighting for survival in peak Serie A, Le Rondinelle were relegated in the year of his arrival, but in retrospect, it was a personal blessing for the teen, whose 25-minute cameo in the top flight became almost 1,500 by the end of his second season. Game time was vital, so even if his team were struggling, Hamšík was only getting stronger, settling into the culture of Calcio as an all-rounded midfielder. Hitting double digits domestically, he demonstrated just how impactful he can be when given a full season, and he caught plenty of attention, partly because it was hard to miss him. Rocking his socks low like Totti, the 6-footer's spiked up hair not only pushed him towards 6'2", but made him distinctive, while starring in one of the more competitive Serie B years. After Calciopoli, Juventus had been relegated, but held on to several world-class names, while at the other end of the boot, Napoli, never properly recovering from Maradona's departure, had gone bankrupt, dropping into the 3rd tier, but were rebuilding. Hamšík's most important of the 11 goals he put away that year came under the lights of the São Paulo, a consolation goal that, along with all the Neapolitans, Eduardo Reja was impressed by. Returning to the highest level, Napoli had to ensure they didn't come straight back down, and bolstered the squad, investing €5.5 million on the kid from Banská Bystrica. Aurelio De Laurentiis, the film producer who saved the club back in '04, buying it and now sitting as chairman, backed the risky purchase, promising fans that this unknown was one to watch. And in his debut, Hamšík hammered in the point. 2007 was the year all began to change. Called up to Slovakia's national team, as well as being voted as the country's best young player, all of a sudden, his name carried some weight. Hailing from neighbouring nations, parallels were soon drawn between he and the man he idolised, Pavel Nedved, as the eccentric 17 continued to boost his tally. The 3-5-2 setup was designed for goals, and despite starting as the deepest midfielder, it meant Hamšík could drift about, well onto enemy turf, and time his runs into the box. It always looked like luck, but really his opportunism was already that developed, ending the year their league top scorer with 9 strikes. Not to discredit the 20-year-old, who was easily their brightest star, but the team around him was nothing special, and a negative win-to-loss ratio deepened in the follow-up season, slipping to 12th by the summer of '09. In these darker days, one thing that never wavered in Naples was the spirit of the Slovakian, continuing to shine in the south as a beacon for the fans, who always had a soft spot for a maverick. Seeing him hop over onto the track became a regular occurrence, with his celebrations showing just how much he cared. The board began to address their problems, bringing in a new coach, Walter Mazzarri, and acquiring the services of Fabio Quagliarella, a red-hot striker, 2 proven names in Serie A who could get Napoli competing again. Having a focal point up top gave them structure, and the Italian was there for Hamšík to both provide for and play off. Still, he couldn't displace the Slovak as their hero. At 21, he was doing everything. Standing over corners and penalties, you never saw nerves on him, whether dropping deep, putting his vision to use in the build-up, or applying the finishing touch. For a 3rd year in a row, he'd concluded things as their most lethal man, getting Napoli back on track, back in the table's upper half, and back in Europe, with their best finish since 1994. The bliss soon multiplied as Hamšík, after 2 goals in qualifying, bore the armband as Slovakia travelled to South Africa for their first ever World Cup. Drawing their first game and losing their second, a win was the only way to save them from elimination. But needing to steal all points from the world champions, the odds were against them. An epic match in Johannesburg saw the underdogs claim 3 in a 5-goal game, sending home Gli Azzurri and doubling down on the history books by reaching the knockouts.
Slovakia are going through!
That was as far as they went. Still, Slovakia left Africa with newfound respect from their sporting peers, who now recognised this generation as a real threat. Hamšík's outreach had expanded most of all, who'd underlined his work in Italy with commanding performances on the biggest stage, spearheading his nation to their greatest achievement to date as their youngest ever captain. Returning to the Europa League, Napoli was still a far cry from their glory days, but when Palermo's Edison Cavani arrived, the vibe at the San Paolo shifted. Up to this point, the 17 had carried them with 9, 10, 12 goals per year. However, the similarly aged Uruguayan was a different kettle of fish to Quagliarella, who De Laurentiis loaned out so the new boy could thrive as a singular striker. Supporting him alongside Ezequiel Lavezzi, Hamšík wasn't disheartened to share the spotlight, especially when the goals started flowing and results picked up. An attacking trifecta came to be. Lavezzi was provider, Cavani finisher, and Hamšík did both. Pinging long shots from daring range, he was a threat from anywhere and had to be closed down ASAP, because otherwise he'll punish you off either foot. Silky too, the playmaker could drop the shoulder and dribble through a back line, or sneakily thread a delivery into the 7. Quickly he'd become one of the best of his kind. Obviously, the Özils, Schneiders and Silvers of the world got better press, but in terms of output, Marek was right up there, though despite the growing hype, his focus stayed on chasing down silverware in the Azzurri colours. The chance came in 2012, matching Juventus in the fight for the Coppa Italia, with the Olimpico their arena. The game highlighted what had made the last 2 years so special with the Partenope, with Lavezzi's pace and skill baiting the keeper for Cavani's clinical right to put them ahead, before the Central European broke through to deliver the final dagger. For 22 years, the Neapolitans had been starved, and this nourished them, but it felt like more was to come. With Serie A's top marksman, most complete midfielder, and Walter Mazzarri's exhilarating, high-intensity, counter-attacking style, the confidence of the Southerners was radiating nationwide. Now a vice-captain, Hamšík was becoming ever more influential, helping newcomers feel welcome as the squad grew, and remaining a true team player who has the will to act in key moments. With his running more intelligent, passing more incisive, and finishing deadly, he hit new heights with double digits in both goals and assists, thanks to the electric chemistry between he and the Uruguayan.
It's too easy.
They pushed the Bianconeri all the way, but couldn't get the job done, finishing as runners-up to Conte's side as they had in the Supercoppa that August. 3 years, over 100 goals, and only one medal to show for it, De Laurentiis had to face the facts and accepted a €65 million bid from Paris Saint-Germain for the ace marksman. Now having lost two of his most gifted teammates, as well as the architect of Napoli's rise, Hamšík could have easily felt betrayed, or as if his time was coming, but never even entertained the notion, pledging himself to the San Paolo for another 5 years. The movie mogul made an odd choice that summer, appointing Rafael Benitez as head coach. The Spaniard had a great run in the noughties, but since his Anfield dismissal seemed to struggle, crushing Inter Milan, the champions of Europe, and facing hostility at Stamford Bridge, neither of which jobs he'd been welcomed back to for a second term. Nevertheless, he was given funds to build a team in a huge transfer window, bringing in a truckload of new names to transform the identity of the club, the priciest of which was Cavani's replacement, Gonzalo Higuain, with whom the Slovakian made sure to bond. Picking up right where he left off, Hamšík had an amazing start, bagging back-to-back braces to open the season, and rapport with the newcomers was immediate.
Higuain!
Then, a December foot injury ruled him out until the new year, but upon his return Paolo Cannavaro left, and he was named captain of Napoli. Despite this, as well as the years of servitude in the south, Benitez didn't value him as much as the Neapolitans, dropping Hamšík several times across the months and subbing him early, which harmed his stats. From 37 starts to now 23, his high confidence took a massive hit, and with everything changing around him, from personnel to formation to the training regimen, the undying positivity of the skipper began to wane. The Partenope's character had been diminished by Benitez's stubbornness, insisting on his selection and barely rotating the squad, so come May, the players were run ragged. Still, his signings had proven their worth, and though they didn't live up to last year, another Coppa Italia run landed them in Rome for the final, where they overwhelmed Fiorentina for Hamšík's first trophy lift with the armband. The vibe of the dressing room was lacking, but Rafa's approach barely changed into the follow-up, and things actually got worse. Uninterrupted by injury, Hamšík was seen far more regularly, linking up brilliantly with Higuain once he learned his striking habits, and continuing to thrash brutal long shots over the line. You could see he was playing with anger, driven to prove the Spaniard wrong. It was the only time we saw his attitude match his image. Allegedly, Benitez didn't make it clear how he was expected to play as a trequartista, and the miscommunication was clear to see, so though fifth marked their worst season in years, Hamšík couldn't help but smile when Rafa got the sack. His disastrous reign was ended, and a Napoli rebuild was on the cards, for which the board drafted in a much lower profile name. The saviour of Empoli, Maurizio Sarri, was seen by De Laurentiis as the man to recapture that notion of team over individual. Making zero fiscal demands and known for his entertaining teams, Sarri also had a vested interest. Born in Naples during the 60s, so it felt like this less glamorous backstep could actually be the way forward.
Sia fisicamente stiamo lavorando molto di più e tatticamente penso che mister è un po' maniacale, allora stiamo lavorando tosto.
The skipper wanted to be more involved across the pitch, so Sarri listened and sank him deeper into a three-man midfield where he'd operate as the metronome of Napoli. Under the smoker, his role was very different. Now a deep-lying playmaker or regista, he had more time on his hands to control the game's pace and better guide the team. Keeping the boys at the back relaxed and the midfield more composed, the group had stability with Hamšík in their spine. Less involved in the advanced areas, his stats took a hit, but this time he didn't mind, as the now acclimatised Argentine was in monstrous form. With top wingers either side and a renowned playmaker off his back, Higuain hit his absolute peak, making the Azzurri title contenders again. Going into the Christmas break as champions, there were a few too many losses after the new year to threaten Juve's throne, but a second place was a statement that they were back and here to stay. Missing out on the last two big tournaments with Slovakia, Hamšík had guided them to a return in France that summer for Euro 2016, scoring 5 times in qualifying. The group stage was tough. Victims to prime Bale and his Wales side, and awaiting England for the third game, they needed a result against Russia. No longer captain, he nevertheless put on a superior show in Lille, clipping a lob over to Vladimir Weiss, who claimed the opener before crafting a chance for himself. In a summer stacked with screamers, his was amongst the best, as their most capped national to date saved his country from an early flight. Of course, drawing Germany put their campaign to bed in the first round, but having overperformed, Slovakia's homecoming was celebrated like a win. Back in Italy, as everyone was gearing up for another high-octane Serie A season, more confident than ever, this team was the one to return the Scudetto to Naples. A sense of déjà vu killed the excitement. Juventus snatched their striker for a groundbreaking €90 million, the most expensive fee in Italian history, and the adoration for Higuain soured overnight. Like Cavani, he was irreplaceable, and it would take years to build up a marksman like that. Though as things got underway, Gli Azzurri realised they already had one. The overlooked Dries Mertens had been a functional sub since arriving from PSV in 2013, until Sarri clocked a pattern. Every time he brings on the Belgian, the Neapolitans feel more ferocious. They couldn't do without Lorenzo Insigne's Turaggios from the left, and the spindly speedster Jose Callejon couldn't be moved from the right, so Sarri dropped Mertens in as centre forward. 7 goals in 2 games confirmed this as a masterstroke, and the alchemy across the front line was so strong straight away that Napoli became an even better watch than before. Full of energy and pace to match, the trio suffocated defences endlessly, leading from the front as the whole team, now initiated, began playing their gaffer's brand of footy, dubbed by many as Sarriball. Described as vertical tiki-taka, possession was pivotal, but with an injection of adrenaline, so some of the goals we saw from them were unbelievable. Many came from the magical right or left of Marek, who often in a midfield with Alan and Jorginho felt more inclined to get up and fast-track his way to a Serie A century. Again, the captain adjusted perfectly to the new ways, publicly declaring this the best they'd ever been. and it was obvious they were all enjoying themselves. This was the lane Napoli stayed in for 2 years, dumbfounding opponents with their quick passing, tireless running and insatiable appetite for goals.
Marek Hamšík!
Another aspect consistent with this period was the lack of material success, which after 3 years ultimately drove the coach away. The Partenope's character had fluctuated a lot in the recent years, and once Sarri left for London, it again dipped. But Carlo Ancelotti managed them to a revival. Harnessing the Sarriball spirit left behind, the veteran just let them play as they wanted, afraid to kill their momentum. With the case of Hamšík, who is now Napoli's all-time leading scorer, Ancelotti again tread carefully. Now in his 30s, he had to be preserved, so he worked out a schedule of 2 games, 1 break, sitting ahead of the centre-backs in Jorginho's former role, where less running was needed. It worked well, until he picked up a thigh problem in December, which kept him out across the winter. By this point though, talks with the Chinese Super League were in progress, and by February had advanced. On the 2nd, Hamšík played his last ever game at the São Paulo, and 2 weeks later flew from Naples International to ink his name on a contract with Dalian Yifang. The city felt different without him, as he had been woven into their identity for the past 11 years, while the team tried to fill his boots. Meanwhile, in Asia, Hamšík continued in his holding role as captain, where he could still grab a couple of goals, yet averaging less than a point a game. He didn't feel the team were competitive and wasn't ready to relax, so he returned to Europe. IFK Göteborg of Sweden's second tier opened their doors to him, though it was really a ploy to grab the attention of his national selectors and get on the plane for Euro 2020. Scoring only once in Allsvenskan, he made it a special one, smashing home the goal of the season in his last game before setting off. At the delayed tournament, he got to wear the armband and lead out his country for a last dance, but despite an opening day win, this time the Falcons weren't so fortunate. In the wake of what was his ultimate tournament with Slovakia, he made a final stop at Trabzonspor of Turkey's Super League, but wasn't here to chill out either. In his mid-30s, the midfielder appeared 65 times in 2 years, endearing himself to yet another ardent fan base before retiring in 2023. Having also done the same internationally, with a big ceremony and farewell match as you'd expect, he came out of retirement to start twice in the European qualifiers, aiding them to 4 wins out of 4. Then, this June, coached the boys in Germany to another round of 16 finish, cementing his status as a true legend of the Slovaks. On first glance, he may look like the type of punk you'd see in a biker gang from Mad Max and expect him to be a foul-mouthed fighter. Marek Hamšík is a solid example of why a book's cover doesn't tell the whole tale. From all accounts, he's a diamond character and has been so forever. His niceness, like the Mohawk, never changed. From arriving in Naples, he was met with such passion from the Partenope, where a rebel is embraced, and in no time, he decided he'd never leave. Instantly a fan favourite, once they saw him play, it took very little to make him a legend. Impossible to hate, respect of the captain was endemic, and receiving less than 40 cards in his 20-year career. Hamšík was a disciplined pro and model sportsman. Diego Maradona's the most important player in Napoli's history, and that won't ever change. But if he's their prophet, the Slovakian's a saint. Saving the club, he spent over a decade restoring their reputation as a pillar of Italian football. And yeah, no Scudetto, no Champions League, it's a legacy whose puzzle is short a piece, and Hamšík's name holds less weight in the game for it. But it's solely because loyalty became his real strength, denying moves to Liverpool, to Juventus, where a silverware shortcut was guaranteed. Though at the cost of his bond with his city, to him it was a rip-off.